Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse has made over $190 million with only a $90 million budget. Its sequel made $690 million, and its video game made $260 million. It was the highest rated Spider-Man movie in 2018 on Rotten Tomatoes, and altogether, Miles Morales has made over $1 billion for the franchise. So, what can we learn from Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse to make our content absolutely bang? I spent the last 10 hours analyzing Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and reverse engineering their content and storytelling in order to show you so that brands and creators watching this can use it in their own content. So why am I even talking about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse? TVs and movies are made by some of the most talented people the storytelling industry has to offer. And we have the privilege of not only consuming that content, but being able to analyze it and see what all the patterns are so that we can use it in our own content. So, what can we compare? We can compare storytelling tools, creative decisions, psychology, the emotional investment and triggers they get you to feel. Some of the more difficult stuff that's a little more format dependent is the fluidity of it. So, in Spider Man, it's a movie, obviously, so it'll have an hour and a half of uninterrupted storytelling before it has a sequel where it'll have to bridge a gap a little bit. So if you're doing short form, written form, 30-minute YouTube videos, the cutting between overarching narratives might be a little different, but it's overall still the same. The first thing I want to go over when we talk about this is defining identity. Identity is what you will be using in every single piece of content you ever create, and is the most powerful tool in every single piece of content I've ever seen. So, identity is either the fact of being who or what a person, thing, or is, which is Spider-Man. Miles Morales is Miles Morales, and then he's also Spider-Man. So those are his identities. And then it's a close similarity or affinity. So this is why hero's journey stories work so well, and why Marvel and all these superhero stories blow up, is because we all in our heads view ourselves as some kind of superhero going through struggles, overcoming things, achieving great things, achieving missions that are aligned with our principles. And so there's a lot of ways in storytelling to have you identify with the character. Let's go to the next piece. How is identity leveraged in Spider-Man? So there's a few ways. One is that we obviously have the Spider-Man nostalgia. Everyone knows about Spider-Man. Everyone's read a comic book, seen a show, seen a movie. They've seen something about Spider-Man. They understand it, and they already have some emotional investment, whether they're a kid or a 40-year-old adult that watched the 2002 movie or read the comic books in the 80s or whatever it is. And so they've already been through the highs and the lows and the inevitable losses and growth. And so the movie would leverage a lot of things they already feel as ways to identify with the character as well as move the story forward. And I'll get into that in the next section. The second way identity is leveraged is with the character itself. So obviously there's Spider-Man, but this is Miles Morales, who is a new character to the whole Spider-Man universe. And so he has the Spider-Man story, like the typical Spider-Man story, but then it's a little different. So they change some things around. They have like overarching themes of like spoilers, of like someone passing, like a loved one passing away, or like figuring out the whole Spider-Man identity on your own, all those kinds of things. And so they tweak those in different unique ways that haven't quite been tweaked before, but they're still tweaking on those. And so they're leveraging the Spider-Man identity, but it's in a new way, and we're watching Miles go through it as the main character, and we're watching his whole process. So that's why we're invested in him. It's his hero's journey. The third way that they are leveraging identity is with the cast of characters they have. So they have Porky the Spider Pig, they have Gwen, they have original Spider-Man that's from another universe, they have Miles, and then they have this one, I think her name's Penny. And so they all have their own unique backstories, but everyone can identify with one of them. The cartoony pig one might be for younger kids. Gwen might be for young girls who could be interested in Spider-Man: The Hero's Journey, but don't necessarily identify with the characters. Original Spider-Man is most likely going to reach the people who love Spider-Man first. So maybe they watched the 2002 movie or Like many, many years ago, Miles Morales is the new age kind of Gen Z Spider-Man and goes through a lot of the current developmental things that a Gen Z Spider-Man would go through. And then we have Penny, who's more of this like anime themed character. And then there's a few more. There's Spider-Man, who's more of this like old age 1950s guy, tough guy. And so there's definitely some people who would love him as well. So there's all those kinds of different aesthetics. They all have their own unique story, but it's all under Spider-Man's umbrella. So every single one is leveraging the Spider-Man bridge, but has their own target. Psychographic is a better word. You want to target psychographics instead of demographics, but just for ease of explanation, they all have their own demographic that they're reaching to. Another way they're leveraging identity, and this is more about the brand and the IP. It leverages a comic book aesthetic. So Spider-Man obviously started in 1962, but it was out of comic books. And so they're taking all of these comic book aesthetics. Right here we can see this is like the first scene where it really happens, but we're hearing his thoughts through comic book bubbles. And they do all kinds of stuff like this with the grainy backgrounds and comic book aesthetics. And so that really gives life and identity to the brand. So now you're like, if I ever see this, I know it's Marvel, I know it's Spider-Man. It's good brand recognition. And lastly, at the end of the movie, they state that anyone can wear the mask. And so in that case, that means identity is shared by everyone. And it becomes a mission, a lifestyle, and an aspiration. And so these are huge, very important for whatever brand you're building, content. If you're a content creator, if you're a B2B finance, if you're direct-to-consumer, e-com, all of those are going to need to leverage their mission, a lifestyle, and an aspiration in some kind of way to create a cult community of people who are really behind you and know you very well. And it hooks people. It hooks people into when they leave the movie, they are Spider-Man. They are going to go do good deeds. They're going to overcome struggle. They're going to do right by their family. And that hooks them into the lifestyle until the next movie. And then we can obviously see how that went when the first movie made 190 million, and then the second movie made 690 million. So it went well. It went very well for them. Moving from how identity is leveraged, they're all of these are backed by some psychological trigger or event. So just talking about the psychology of how they're wrapping you into this, behind every identity that is being leveraged, there are these three emotional triggers. So you have understanding your audience. This says use emotional words, but it's basically emulating the language of your audience. How do they describe their struggles? How do they describe their wins? How do they talk about life? What are their preferences and biases? And that's how you really get to talk to them. That's how you identify with if it's Miles, if it's Gwen, if it's original Spider-Man. And then you tell the story using that kind of language. And so these are all separate pieces. Identifying the audience is probably the hardest part. But if you're solving a problem, if you build something, if you're creating content that solves a problem, you'll start to understand who you're talking to the more you create it. And then you can narrow in on the kind of language that they're using. You can also look at like reviews of other content, look at other creators, other businesses solving similar problems. And then it's a great way to get competitive research. Anyway, back to the psychology. So we have identity and we have emotional investment. They're leveraging identity to get you to emotionally invest. And every single point that they're leveraging this are at like life-changing points in the movie. So in the beginning of the movie, Miles makes a promise to the Spider-Man that dies in his universe. And then so now he's wrapped into it, and you're wrapped into the story too, because he was just trying to figure out why am I becoming Spider-Man. Now he meets Spider-Man. Now he makes a promise. He's like, I need to do this, and so that sets the scene for the entire arc of the story. So there will be a lot of mini arcs within this overarching story that he needs to keep this promise. Then he has family tensions, which everyone can relate to. He has the pressure to conform to being himself, the pressure to conform, and the pressure to be yourself as a teenager. So there are lots of things that his parents want him to be. There are things he wants to be. There are things the other Spider-Men want him to be. And so he's fighting a lot of that and trying to figure all of those things out. And that's very Gen Z, teenager, 20 something year old developmental things that they're going through. And so there's a lot of identity that goes along with that. And so they can identify with being Spider Man in a sense. And then it's all told throughout this hero's journey. So it's hero starts at wherever they start, and then they're presented with this big, monumental, massive task that they're not sure they can get. And then they meet people along the way. Some add pressure to them, some raise them up, and through that they are hardening. They're like becoming more of the developed person they need to be able to complete the mission that they need to complete. So we'll go into how the story is pushed forward. How exactly are they doing that? The main reason is through world building. And there's a lot of little things that go into this through motifs, which I'll go over in the next section. But with world building, you have, like I said, you have your allies, you have your villains, you have your unique traits. Spider-Man obviously has like electric abilities now and invisibility, which is totally different from every other Spider-Man we've seen. We've never seen these kinds of powers before. This is totally different, and so we're wrapped into this. Like, how did he get these powers? Like, why is he special from other Spider-Man was already special. How is he special from other Spider-Men? So he already stands out from the people that stand out. And then we have these story-changing events that are all built around retention. So each of these allies, villains, unique traits, family members are all used as tools to create story-pivoting events, story-changing events, life-changing events that drive retention for the story. It is completing a loop, opening another loop, and sometimes bringing in a motif from another part of the story that is like a longer narrative that just keeps popping up. And so just to go through a little bit of the story, we can see Miles gets to school, his dad drops him off. He ends up, feeling kind of neutral about it. He goes out that night with his Uncle Aaron. They spray paint, and then he inevitably gets bit by the spider. And he's like, well, in the moment, it wasn't a big deal. He just slapped the spider off. But later on, he ends up outgrowing his pants. And now we see these comic book thought bubbles, which is a motif to show that something changed. Then he goes back to that kind of sewer place to figure out like what happened with that spider. Why am I having all these changes? What's going on? Am I having puberty? So here we can see this is obviously he's going through something as Spider-Man here, but this is also like mirroring his target audience, right? So he's going through changes. He has all these overwhelming emotions. He feels like everything's happening at once. And then here he does get thrown into a fight with Spider-Man and Kingpin and them. So he meets Spider-Man, makes a promise to Spider-Man. This is literally what sets up the rest of the movie. So it sets up him going back, but this is like, oh, I'm in this. I made this promise. I need to accomplish this. And this is where this massive task for the hero's journey comes in. And then he finds out the Spider-Man he met died. So he was supposed to be his mentor and teach him how to do all these things. And now he lost this. So he has no one that understands him. He's at it all alone. And then he gets these electric powers. He meets the alternate Spider-Man. He gets invisibility powers. He meets Gwen. And so each one of these keeps your attention. It's like, whoa, when did he get powers? Oh, who's this guy? And so they tend to do these pretty close together because he used these electric powers when he meets him. So you get an open loop, and then you get an open curiosity loop, and then something that moves the story forward. So open curiosity loop with the electric hands. You're like, what is that? How do you do that? And then this guy moves the story forward. This is like what he wants to do and what Miles wants to do, and they have this kind of discourse. And then they end up working together. They want to go steal some data, so they go do that. Finds out he's invisible. They run into Doc Ock. They run away. And then, lo and behold, a new character saves the day. So pushes the story forward. And then they meet all the other characters. They try and abandon him because he's not ready. He goes through this mental conversation. He talks to his dad. And then he grows up a little bit. He starts getting his powers. And then we're back to in full motion Spider-Man. And so now to talk about the motifs that I mentioned earlier, here's just a few of them. And these are tools you can use in anything, but these are just reoccurring motifs in Spider-Man, and so it's important to keep in mind how they're using these motifs. So they have the glitch motif, which happens ever since the first piece, like when he meets Spider-Man in the Collider. All of these little like glitchy things in this building. As the story goes on, we start to see more. This is Spider-Man literally glitching, and they're at the Super Collider. And then this is Miles Morales trying to save the day, and everything is glitchy. Everything's in this weird universal, like deep red colors. Um, and so that's one way to show a motif. It shows it as the story goes on. So we made that promise with the mission early on, and this glitch motif follows it. It's kind of like the yin and yang. The promise is what moves the story forward, and the glitch is what follows him and drags him. It's this negative that follows him the whole way until he can achieve his goal. Then we have the intro motif. So this is every single Spider-Man in this movie got to introduce themselves, give their personality, where are they from, why are they this way, what's their version of the Spider-Man story. And so that helps you identify, that helps their target audiences identify with them because they get to know them in this quick, fast way. And then they see them act throughout, so they're a little more attached, and then they're watching them a little bit more closely as the movie goes on. We see Gwen get introduced as the female Spider-Man, and then Miles is actually the last Spider-Man to get introduced, and there is reasoning behind that. So all of these have creative direction reasoning for why they put things in different places. The reason Miles is last is because the whole movie was about his Spider-Man origin story. So they're all explaining their origin stories that they already had as Miles is going through his, and by the end of the movie, he has already discovered, oh, I am Spider-Man. This is who I am. This is what I do. And then it's a good close to the story that we find out he's accepted his identity as Spider-Man. He's grown into himself. He doesn't need the original Spider-Man who was going to teach him because he figured it out. The last motif I want to point out, which I just think is super cool, is this blur motif. So we see Gwen and her universe and this little blurred background, and we see other dimension Peter Parker and his universe, and the background is blurred out. And I just thought it was a cool way to make it distinct that they're not in Miles' universe. So it's not canon necessarily. These are all like alternate things that are happening, cool stories to keep track of. But we also see that the character, for them, like they're blurry, their edges are blurred, but we can see her face pretty well. We can see his face pretty well. So they're still important characters in the storyline. So how do you, as a business owner, a content creator, SaaS builder, use this to your advantage? One thing you do is identify your purpose, your mission, your story. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? Who are you trying to help? That is every single Spider-Man story. They identify who is this person, what are their stripes, what are their principles, and who are they trying to help. And so that drives the whole story. That drives who they meet. It drives the creative direction behind the powers they get, the visuals that are used, the audio that is used, the expressions that are used, how they develop as a character. So this is like the core of everything that you do. And then you can go into the world building around it. So whether you have partnerships, product launches, content series, niche pivots, if you're changing categories, even your personal life events, if you're building a personal brand or a brand, if something happens to the brand, that's a canon event. So you get to choose how you tell the story about it. And so it's a little different. If you're a personal brand, you kind of get to choose how you want to talk about it. If you're a brand, sometimes things will happen with the company that you have to address. But for the most part, you do get a lot of creativity around this. And you get to decide your story in canon on socials when you make content. You decide how people interpret you. You decide who you talk to. And so that's all. So identifying your purpose and story helps you identify the core of what you are and who you're talking to. Then everything you do is canon. No matter what you are doing, if you're doing something, it is now canon to your story, and you can find ways to make content about it and think about the creative direction of it with your mission. And then you just stay consistent with that. So now you have your identity, you have the language you want to talk with, you have the problems you solve, you have the audience you're talking to, and that's really all you need. And then after that, it's just content ideas to be like, how do I showcase what I have in a way that resonates with my audience? And you can use your mission as a lens to speak through. And the more you do that, the more people will understand you right away that you're like, oh, this is this person. I like that they did this. I'll watch this. And so you build that identity on a social front with your target audience. And that's how you build this brand equity and leverage creative direction in your content. So that is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I really love telling you guys about these storytelling tools and psychology and creative direction. If you liked it, please leave a like. If you want to see more, please subscribe and let me know in the comments what you would want me to do it on. Peace.